Do you have, or are you looking to buy, a Renault ZOE? Do you want to learn more about the reliability concerns associated with the ZOE? If so, you've come to the right place. At the time I bought my Renault ZOE ZE50, there were two bits of information I didn't know. One was the change in the Euro NCAP safety rating, and the other was a couple of the reliability issues associated with the car. I've discussed the Euro NCAP safety rating in another video. If you're looking to buy a ZOE, then I'd recommend watching that. It explains what I think you should know about the subject. It not only mentions the history, but goes into some depth as to why it's not as simple a subject as it might first appear. Furthermore, it dispels some of the misinformation that has been spread on that subject. That video will be linked from the end screen, as well as from the description. You will also find a lot of other links in the description of today's video, bringing together lots of disparate information about the reliability of the ZOE, which I'm going to summarise for you today. If you're considering buying, then this is what I think you need to know about that subject. So as not to make this video too long, this will be a fairly light touch on each of the areas of concern, but the links are there to allow you to do more detailed research on any one topic if there is one of particular interest. And I'll summarise my thoughts at the end. The potential weakness I did know about before I bought the car was the front suspension. The drop links, which connect the car's anti-roll bar to the top of the front suspension, are known to be a bit under-spec'd, causing them to fail fairly frequently. The symptom of the issue is knocking from the suspension when going over bumps, although it sometimes starts as squeaking. The drop links are pretty cheap and very easy to replace. So whilst this can need doing every 30,000 miles, 50,000 kilometres in the extreme, it's not an expensive or complex job, and I wouldn't worry about it. Consider it a maintenance item. On occasion, the ball joints on the lower suspension arm can become loose, leading to knocking, including when steering, as well as the front of the car feeling a bit vague. This is something I've had happen on a number of cars in the past. It's not really specific to the ZOE, and as with other cars, results in the need to replace the lower arm and ball joint, which form a single item. Due to the front subframe blocking access to one of the bolts, this is a slightly more time-consuming job than it should be, but again, it's not too terrible, and it doesn't seem all that common. My recommendation is to have a bit of mechanical sympathy for the car. Slow down for speed bumps and try to steer around potholes where it's safe to do so, and this one should hopefully never happen to you. The rest of the topics we need to cover apply to bits under the bonnet, including to do with the EV drivetrain. In order to adequately cover those, we quickly need to touch on the variants of drivetrain that exist, as the problems and repairs differ based on the variant involved. I'll quickly cover the two different families and how to tell them apart. If you already know this, then there's a chapter marker to allow you to skip ahead to the next section. There have been two main families of drivetrain fitted to the ZOE. When it was first launched, the ZOE was fitted with a drivetrain made by Continental, with the motor and electronics bought in from that supplier. After 2 years, Renault released the second family using a drivetrain they created in-house. This second drivetrain was a bit more efficient, giving the car slightly better range, but with the trade-off that it couldn't charge quite as quickly. However, the second variant didn't immediately replace the first. They were sold in parallel for some years, allowing customers to choose whether to get the better range or the faster charging speed. We can't tell which is which solely by age. There are 3 ways to tell which is which. Firstly, the cars with Continental motors use a model type beginning with a Q, particularly the Q210, later rebranded to be the Q90. In contrast, the R240, R90, R110 and R135 all use the Renault drivetrain. The model type is probably in the paperwork for the car, but also appears on the sticker inside the driver's door. That's the right door in the UK, and the left door for cars built for left-hand drive markets. Q stands for quick charge, whereas R stands for rapid charge. There's nothing confusing at all about that, is there? Sadly, you have to know that quick is quicker than rapid and is capable of charging at 43 kilowatts. So that's the second way to tell the difference. If the car can charge at 43 kilowatts AC, then it's got the Continental drivetrain, whereas if its maximum AC charging speed is 22 kilowatts, then it's got the Renault drivetrain. The third way to tell the difference is to look under the bonnet. They appear quite different in the top left-hand corner. If they have a circular plastic housing on top, like mine shown here, then that's the Renault drivetrain. If instead they have a rectangular aluminium box in place of that plastic housing, then they have the Continental drivetrain, which doesn't have the plastic fan housing we saw on my car, as the Continental motor was water-cooled, whereas the Renault motor is air-cooled. Both the original ZE with its 22 kilowatt-hour battery and the ZE40 with the 41 kilowatt-hour battery were available with either drivetrain. However, all ZE50s with their 52 kilowatt-hour batteries have Renault drivetrains. Okay, that's the drivetrain families covered off. We'll refer back to this as we talk about some bits of the drivetrain, but now we have that understanding, we're ready to talk about a few potential failures under the bonnet. The first is problems with the heat pump system. It's not uncommon for any car to need an occasional regas of its aircon, but the ZOE seems to need them a bit more than we might expect. Occasionally, cars seem to develop a leak from the heat pump, and there's a valve behind the front bumper that might be the first place to check. A number of cars look a bit oily in that area, suggesting a small leak from there. Secondly, a few cars have suffered a failure of the heat pump compressor. That's a fairly expensive part to replace if needed, but it's not a particularly long job. That's fairly manageable. The next failure mode to discuss is the DC to DC converter. This is the thing that charges the 12-volt accessory battery under the bonnet. On the early ZOE ZEs with the 22 kilowatt-hour battery, this was an obvious weakness and happened a bit on both drivetrains. However, Renault seemed to identify the problem and started using an updated part towards the end of 2016, so it's not all that common a failure mode anymore. If this were to happen to you, then how difficult it is to repair depends on which variant of the car you have. Repairs on the Q family would be quite straightforward, whereas repairs on the Renault drivetrain would be more expensive. However, this one seems to be getting much rarer now. Most of this type of failure should have occurred by now, with the better part used to replace the fragile one. So let's move on so that we don't risk getting bogged down. The next area of concern is the onboard charger. When the ZOE first launched, the charging system was quite problematic. Renault tried something innovative, and it caused them some bother. I have to wonder whether the very early problems, all with the original Continental drivetrain at this point, remember, were why Renault wanted to develop their own drivetrain to take full control of the issues. I should point out, however, that this is entirely speculation on my part. The relationship between the two companies was close and seemed to be a strong collaboration, so I might be off the mark there. Onboard charger failures would plague both drivetrains in the early days, and again, how easy they are to repair depended on which drivetrain was in use. The Q-Series cars were pretty easy to fix, the R-Series cars much more involved. We'll come back to that point later. The important point for the moment is that Renault did seem to get on top of the problem. It seems to be less common on newer cars. So again, I want to forge ahead. We've got one more to cover. The final area of concern is not the battery. If you're thinking that, then no. The battery in the ZOE seems to fare very well. Instead, the problem is the motor, and in particular, failed bearings. This can be identified by a whining noise from under the bonnet when the car is in motion, which usually gets louder or higher pitch with the speed of the car, although which does depend on the exact mode of failure. If you hear that noise, you need to act fairly quickly. If the car is still in warranty, then get it to a Renault dealership to get it resolved. If not, then instead go to an independent garage who can help with the motor bearing issue. There's not really much point taking it to a Renault after the warranty expires, as they will give you an eye-watering quote for a repair. You see, a main dealer is required to fit new parts, and as Renault consider the motor a non-serviceable item, they will want to fit a whole new one at vast expense, many thousands of pounds. In contrast, an independent Hevra garage will provide various options, including replacing the bearings, which is reasonably doable, or fitting a second-hand motor if you didn't catch it in time and the existing motor can't be refurbished. As far as I know, this failure mode is specific to the Renault drivetrain and therefore could happen on any ZE50, since they only have Renault drivetrains. Not only that, but it seems disappointingly common. ZOEs can live long lives, as a story carried by The Driven in February 2020 attested to, referring to a car that had racked up 345,000 kilometres. That's almost 215,000 miles. However, this story is about a ZE40, and it's not clear which drivetrain it was fitted with. The car in question was a taxi, and the faster charging of the Q model would probably be useful in that scenario, so it's probably the Continental drivetrain. Inside EVs have also carried a story about a ZOE that had done 186,000 miles, about 300,000 kilometres. In this case, the story tells us it's a Q210, so we know it has the Continental drivetrain. Meanwhile, Jonathan Porterfield released a series of videos on a high-mileage ZE50 he bought a few years ago, the last of which was recommending we avoid high-mileage cars, as his car needed a replacement motor at 114,000 miles, about 185,000 kilometres, which is not great, is it? If we are lucky, a bearing replacement is what's required, a little refurb work on the motor. We just drop that out and do a quick switcheroo. Or perhaps not. The word drop here is misleading, the problem being the way the car is built. In order to make the ZOE as small as possible, but offer as much interior space as they could, everything is a bit tightly packed under the bonnet. When Renault designed their drivetrain, they had a spot of bother squeezing it into the space that the Continental system had been designed for. So much so that the motor does not drop out at all. Instead, according to the official Renault procedure, the motor needs to come out of the front of the car. In order to achieve that, quite a lot of work is required in preparation. We need to degas the air conditioning system, remove the arch liners, the front bumper, the charge socket and its wiring, peel back a wiring harness that runs from one side to the other, take off the crash bar and the slam panel, remove the headlights and the 12-volt battery, drain the cooling system before removing the radiator pack and cooling reservoir, then take out the front subframe, drain the gearbox oil and then remove the drive shafts, of course. Only once all that is done is the stack available to come out. And that's really the problem. It all takes a lot of time. And in the commercial world, time is money. It's the labour involved in the disassembly before work and refitting it all afterwards that makes these repairs expensive. Renault may have made a mistake with the motor that leads to this type of failure, but they definitely didn't deliver the best design with their drivetrain. It didn't allow for easy maintenance on the motor and its electronics. Yeah, the electronics. You see, they attached the electronics to the side of the new motor and covered it with a panel that butts up against the main rails of the car, so you can't get to the electronics either without removing the whole stack. Because of this design faux pas, all of the potential faults with the Renault drivetrain get expensive because of that work to strip down and rebuild. It's the labour involved in doing that which forms the basis of large bills if these things happen. To be fair, there's a video on the EV Clinic channel showing them dropping the stack out of the bottom of the car. Clearly that can be done, but it's probably not the best of options. That's not Renault's official process, and when you watch that video and see how many things it catches on as it comes out, you can kind of understand Renault's stance. It would be very easy to damage wiring or cooling whilst doing it that way. There's an information source I want to draw particular attention to, namely the YouTube channel called Gary C EV Repairs. Again, the links are in the description. Gary is clearly extremely knowledgeable and spends his time repairing EVs, especially the ZOE. It seems to have become a reasonably regular job for him to take on these bigger ZOE repairs. We've seen him do a number of motor refurbs, usually for cars at or just over 100,000 miles. It's a number we hear fairly frequently in his videos. Having said that, he ended up doing one on a car at just 54,000 miles. But that started to suggest there might be differences between the different power motors that Renault made, and that maybe the R110 could be less reliable than the others. I think there's probably more to discuss about this motor bearing issue, so drop me a comment and subscribe if you want me to go into more detail on that, and giving the video a like would be a big help to me if you feel it's warranted. Okay, so those are the common issues with the ZOE. It's not all good news. Having said that, pretty much every car has its potential weaknesses. I want to finish by discussing what I think this means for you and me. If you have a ZOE, should you offload it? And if you're looking to buy one, should you avoid it? I certainly think some people might interpret this video that way, but that's not quite what I think. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the one you don't. We know the ZOE's failure modes, so we can watch out for them, have a plan for it if they do happen, and try to avoid them. When it comes to suspension, my plan is to be a little kind to the car. That's generally my approach with any car, to be fair. I think that slowing down for speed bumps is a sensible precaution, and I avoid big potholes where it's safe to do so. When it comes to the drivetrain faults, I think there are a couple of options. Firstly, you could consider taking out Renault's extended warranty if it's available to you. You'd need to read the terms and conditions carefully to make sure that it covers these failures. There's no point having it if it doesn't. The other option is to price it in. Imagine whether the car is worth buying or keeping, based on there being a reasonable chance of spending an extra couple of £1,000 at some point, €2,500. That's where I am, in my mind. The chance of me having a problem in the next 8 years is very low. After all, the car is warranted for another 2 years, and my mileage is a bit limited. Even so, I'm going to start putting a bit of money aside just in case. If I can save £30 to £40 a month, then I start to build up a bit of an insurance policy against an unexpected bill. When the warranty starts to come to an end, then I'll look at the terms of the extended warranty, when that becomes relevant. At the moment, it's too early for that on my car. I don't tend to be an extended warranty sort of person. I tend to think I can achieve something similar with a savings account, given enough time. But there's no harm in seeing what Renault offer once the car is 4 years old. The savings approach does take a bit of discipline though. You can flex the amount you save to suit your financial situation each month, but if you're going to underpay or not pay at all on a regular basis and not make up the shortfall, then an extended warranty might be a better option for you, as the payments can't be flexed. Do be sure to read the terms and conditions though. Whilst I have seen reference to people getting warranty repairs done on forums, you need to be sure that the terms haven't changed in the meantime, and that the repair you are concerned about will be covered in the event that it does happen. We all have our own tolerance to risk, and it's up to you to understand yours and plot a course that achieves it for you. If you are put off the ZOE by what you've heard today and want more information on alternative EVs, then EV Clinic have put together a very useful page on their website listing their thoughts, based on what repairs they've done. That's linked in the description as well. But I would note that they recommend to avoid hybrids. If you consider them a trusted source and are considering a hybrid rather than an EV for reliability reasons, then you might want to read what they say about them. You should also bear in mind that ICE cars can be problematic as well. The myriad of Ford EcoBoost engine failures are a case in point, as are all of the failures of Stellantis wet bells engines as well. And even BMW have created themselves problems with their B47 engine with its super skinny timing belt. Sadly, there are very few guarantees of long-term reliability in the automotive world at the moment. Cars can be a real pain, no matter what drivetrain they use. Thanks very much for joining me. If you have questions or comments, then leave them in the appropriate section. I'd like to hear your experiences in that section. Have you got or had a ZOE? And if so, have you had any reliability issues to date? Does this information concern you? If you're looking to buy one, how do you feel about what you've heard today? If you've liked the video, then it's a big help to me if you click the thumbs up button. And I'd love to have you as a subscriber if you want to see more from me. Thanks.